meeting as a hybrid meeting. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as possible following the meeting. The meeting agenda pack can also be viewed on the Council's website. Everyone participating in the meeting will be attending either in the Council chamber or from remote locations. Members attending remotely must keep their cameras on for the duration of the meeting. However, all attendees should keep their microphones off until invited to speak. Members and officers can indicate they want to speak by pressing the hands up icon, and obviously when I see it, I'll be inviting you to speak. I'll now proceed to the agenda business. Welcome everyone on screen. Great to see everyone here. Okay, item 1 is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence? Richard?
Thank you, Chair. Just to, I haven't got any, for the minutes, for the accuracy of the minutes.
Yeah, well, we're not on those yet.
Right, sorry, when you come to it.
Any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. Colin Davis says that he'll be along, but he will be a bit late.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Stephen? No. Okay. Item 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. No, no one showing. Okay. Item 3, approval of minutes for correctness only. Richard, you can come in now.
Thank you, Chair. I do apologise. Just to say that in the minutes, they've the leader was here, the deputy leader was here in the last meeting. Just to say that they weren't on the committee, but they were attendees, and I think they should go into the minutes, just to show that they are here listening. Chair.
Yeah, if you could note they are in attendance, because obviously within, I believe within the provisions that the leader and the politicians can attend, the cabinet members can attend, because obviously we have every right to call the cabinet members in regards to any decisions affecting their service areas. So I think if we could just put a little box on in regards to those members attending for correctness. Stephen, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Lovely. Okay. So then go to the matter subject to that amendment, the approval of minutes, page 3 to 14. Can I have someone to move, please?
I formally move.
Thank you, Richard. Have I got a seconder?
A second.
Thank you. Anyone against? That's the easiest way to deal with it. No, thank you. They're carried. Item 4 then is the Governance and Audit Action Report. Stephen?
Thank you, Chair. Well, the purpose of this report is to provide members with an update on the Governance and Audit Committee action record. The action record was devised to assist the committee in tracking the decisions made by the committee in the exercise of its functions. In order to assist the committee in ensuring the decisions made by the committee are actioned and implemented, the action record is attached at Appendix A. The committee is recommended to note the action record and provide any comments as appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, members have the action report before them. Are there any comments? Martin?
Yes, Chair, just to thank Nigel for the comprehensive response that I received last week. It dealt with all the points that were raised last time. I did pick up as well, Chair, in the last meeting that we were keen to see an attendance from the parking enforcement team. I just wonder what the situation is.
I think, Karis, do you want to pick that up? That's okay. Colin, we were told you may be a little late, so don't worry.
Yes, sorry. Actually, Zach Shell is on the call today, Chair. If anybody, particularly to pick up this item, which is coming up under the tracker, and it was something that came up through the internal audit review. So Zach is actually here if you wanted him to provide that update.
We could deal with it now, Martin, or we can deal with it on the internal tracker. Maybe easier to deal with it on the internal audit tracker.
I don't mind. I don't know. I don't think Zach would be with you for long. So if members were happy
shall we deal with it now then? If Zach wants to make that update.
Yeah, happy to, Chair. So for the record, Zach Shell, Head of Operations for Communities, standing in for Janine Nightingale today. So on the issue of the parking enforcement and parking policy review, which is overdue, I'm sure Janine's explained in the past, we did have some significant challenges earlier in the year with the management of the parking team. Sadly, Dylan, our parking manager, unexpectedly passed away during the year, and his boss, the team leader, had a period of long-term sickness. So it was just unrealistic to take that action forward at the time. However, we now have recruited and do have a new parking manager in place, Carl, and the team leader has returned from long-term sickness and is back and fully functioning. So the outstanding action is due to be done. I think in our last update, the realistic timeline was to get it done by the end of the financial year, and I think that is still our objective and what we intend doing.
Any questions? Any comments? Nope. Okay, Zach, I'll make a comment now that thank you for that update. It's great to see that the matter is now proceeding despite the challenges, the unfortunate challenges that the department had previously. Good to hear that you're endeavouring to do it by the end of the financial year. So I have a little task for you now that we require a full report in regards to what has been done and what has been put in place for the meeting of the 24th of April 2025. So if we can have a full written report in regards to what has been undertaken, what has been done, if the matter has now been dealt with in full, then that's what is required. People,
no, Richard.
Is that okay?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you very much. So if people are happy with that, Councillor Clark, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Under item 5, 6 and 7, it mentions that you were going to meet with the chairs of scrutiny. Can I ask, has that happened?
I haven't. A lot of this has been down to myself with my agenda commitments, and obviously Councillor Alex Williams was indisposed in some areas. I've got some dates now which has been provided. So I'm going to respond to Stephen today. So hopefully they'll be done next month early on. Is that okay? I'm looking forward to that meeting. But there we are. Okay, any other comments? No, if we can then note that Zach will be bringing a report to, well, it's a recommendation really, that bring a report to the 24th of April 2025 meeting on the parking issues. Can I have someone move firstly that this is a correct record, and secondly that the report will come to us on the 24th of April?
I formally move, Chair.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. Anyone against? No, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is item 5, which is the monitor report, corporate complaints. Who's taking this, Karis?
Kelly is online, I think, to take this report.
Kelly, are you there? Oh, there we are.
Thank you.
Oh, there
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. For the record, my name is Kelly Watson, Chief Officer, Legal, Regulatory and HR. Members, you've had this report that I'm presenting today. It's an annual report. You've had it before. I don't propose to go through the report in any detail. It's the annual letter from the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales in regard to our corporate complaint process and the complaints they have dealt with in relation to Bridgend Council and the Borough of Bridgend during that period. The documents that are in front of you appended to your report, Chair, so I'll just take any questions the committee may have.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. Any questions? Iodine?
Thanks. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Kelly, also. I have a couple of questions. Right. My first question is the 59 cases that were raised with the Ombudsman. Were they first raised with the council before they got escalated to the Ombudsman? That's one.
in terms of implementation of recommendation, only 35% of recommendations were implemented within the year. I'm just concerned about why we don't actually keep to timelines for recommendation. Are there issues, or is it culture within the organization where I see a lot of it actually where recommendations are made and we don't tend to keep to those timelines. And on page 51 of the park, sorry, let me just confirm this. Yeah, so I'm looking at the rows 3 and 4. When exactly do we have the details of what that means? When you say other cases closed after initial consideration, what exactly does that mean? And early resolution of voluntary settlement. I'm not really sure what that's really meant. Thank you.
Thank you, Biden. Kelly, you able to respond?
Yes. Was it page 51 you said?
That was the third question.
Yes, page 51. That was the last question on page 51. Thank you.
I've just got a slightly different pack. So let me just get page 51.
Let me that's the appendix C.
Yeah, let me just grab that. Sorry, I'm working on different screens today than I usually do.
Sorry.
So in general terms, obviously to go through the complaints process before they get to the Ombudsman, they would come through our internal complaints procedure. And obviously, if the complainant isn't satisfied after they've been through our stage 1 and stage 2, they can then refer that to the Ombudsman. So those ones you see there that have been referred to the Ombudsman, they will have previously been through our internal process. And then in relation to the 9 that are dealt with, so they come to Bridgend, obviously they need to be then fed back to the service area where the complaint originates from. The delay, there could be various reasons for delays. It could be to do with the current workload that's ongoing in that service area. It could be the time it needs to be taken to get whatever the recommendation is, to get it in place and up and running appropriately. So there are some that are not done within the timescale.
Is that okay, Biden? Does that answer your questions?
Yes, it answered the first question. And the second one around implementation of recommendation, while we only have 35% implemented.
Yes, as I said, they come back to the local authority and to the service area where the complaint has originated from, and it's for the service area then to implement those recommendations, and that will depend on the workload within that area and the work their day-to-day work that they're doing. So the complaints and the recommendations are complied with, but sometimes not in the strict timescales set out by the Ombudsman for operational reasons. But the complainants are kept updated with the progress then.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to be sure, and I'm a bit confused about that, right? Because I thought timelines are agreed, right? So if we agreed timeline, why are we not able to keep to it? Why are we not actually recommending, when they make recommendation, we actually ask for timelines that can be met?
Yes, yeah. So the Ombudsman will impose the timelines, but obviously sometimes circumstances change. I would anticipate that many of these complaints are coming from the Social Services and Wellbeing Department, who are dealing with urgent work, and as a service, they will need to prioritise then how they deal with day-to-day casework and how they implement recommendations that are coming forward.
Okay. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. If I can raise a number of points on this report. The first one is about the whole principle of making complaints, that we as elected members are also accountable and are taken into account in terms of the complaints policies and indeed action by the Ombudsman. I wonder if it's possible, I think we're all aware of the complaints policy, but if there was some sort of succinct attachment or file that we could send to any constituents who contact us, because I'm mindful that I'm trying to provide a service to a constituent. And if I fall short in any way, they ought to be aware of how they can take that complaint forward. So I think some sort of advice to members would be particularly useful. The second point then is it's good to see that there'll be some improvement in the system through I think it's the Granicus project that's been looked at the moment. If you could have some idea of when that's likely to be introduced, because I think it is important that all complaints, whether they're formal or informal, are brought into a new system and that we have a consistent approach to it. With the report as well, it attempts to give a ward-by-ward breakdown of complaints, which I think that analysis would be complete, would definitely be worth looking into and analysing. The situation, as I understand it at the moment, is that informal complaints aren't looked at on that basis, but they will be. Formal complaints are. But if you note from the report that the bulk of complaints now are coming in by email, and they're not being disaggregated down on a ward-by-ward basis. So my question is, if there is a way that we could put a quick fix in, that if somebody does make a complaint to us by email, that we're able to home in on where that person is living and the ward, etc. The final point then, Chair, is on the Ombudsman's report. I think that does need to be highlighted. I'm not sure if an appendix is the right place to put it. I think maybe consideration ought to be given to including that as an actual agenda item, because the Ombudsman expects us to formally report to the committee. So I think perhaps we shouldn't use the term to bury it in a sort of part of another report. And to pick out that actually the Ombudsman does make reference to the Denbighshire County Council's Wales Penalty Processing Partnership. No, actually Bridgend is one of 10 local authorities who were part of that. And I'm not sure where we actually pick up on the monitoring and the performance of that organisation. The reason I raise it is I was subject to a parking fine a few weeks ago, and it's got me thinking about it. Okay.
Should you have declared an interest then? Thank you for that openness and transparency, Martin. That was great. Kelly, did you get all that?
I think so. So, in relation to the first issues about the members having access, the corporate complaints policy is on the website. The social services complaints policy is also there, and I understand members have had training delivered by the teams on those two aspects. The members who attended that training should have been provided with the links to the relevant complaints policies, but I can get that recirculated to all members. I think what members need to be clear of here is that there are two different processes. So there's a complaint that the public can make about service provision, which would be through the corporate complaints process or the social services complaints process. But if they got complaints about members and members' conduct and behaviour, that would be a referral to the Public Services Ombudsman Code of Conduct team. So that would be a separate referral. And again, members need to go on the Public Services Ombudsman website to find the link there. So I think members just need to be clear that there's two separate issues there. In relation to Granicus, this is being led by the group manager for the customer services team. So I can definitely ask him for an update on some timelines and get that circulated to the committee when that's available. The wards, again, because of the separation of the complaints, if the complaint is to do with a member, so if it's a code of conduct issue, that's when it can be broken down into ward. If it's a more general complaint about service provision, that's more difficult to break down, because if somebody's complaining about social services, for example, and the service they've had, we wouldn't necessarily collate the data of which ward they're living in, because it's not relevant to the complaint really. So whilst we can do it for member complaints, because we'll know which ward the member is serving, it's more difficult to do for just general complaints. And the Public Service Ombudsman report, obviously due to the remit you've got, this only comes to you for noting. It also goes to full council for the same process for noting. Happy to look at it in detail, but given the remit of this committee, it's an information report really. I'm not sure what benefit it would do to have the Ombudsman's letter as a full report, but obviously happy to look at that if that's what the committee would like.
Can I just sorry, I know there's people waiting. In regards to Martin's question about a little aid memoir in regards to complaints, rather than circulate it, I know it may mean a little bit of work, rather than circulating the policy, is there an opportunity, Kelly, to do an A4 sheet to say these are the bullet points that a member of the public has to raise, or this is where they have to go in regards to service complaints and the process? So, you know, they may need to make a complaint via the complaints process, use the email address, etc. If you're not satisfied there, then you go to complaints process 2, and clearly the letter in any event, I would have thought, picks it up, doesn't it, when you deal with part 1 of the complaint. And then when you get to part 2 of the complaint, then, you know, the outcome will be whatever, and part 2 of the complaint letter will say, if you're not satisfied with this, you go to the Ombudsman in regards to a service issue. So just you know, my view is that just a short aid memoir, and similar for reporting members to the Ombudsman for breach of the members' code of conduct. And I'm just wondering, and again, you'll need to tell me because I've been out a little bit of time. I understand that the Ombudsman introduced a process whereby the Council Standards Committee can deal with some issues before they actually get to the Ombudsman. There's some policies that some councils have introduced, or is it a process now still that they go to the Ombudsman and the Ombudsman will revert them back to the council if there's a, you know, if there's a case to answer?
Yes, that is the position with the Ombudsman. So referrals for code of conduct breaches need to go to the Ombudsman. If it's considered a low-level issue, which would tend to be member against member complaints, they can firstly come to myself and I can deal with it under the local resolution process. Okay. But that is only member against member. That wouldn't involve a complaint from a member of the public.
Okay.
I'm happy to do a covering email when I send the links out, but I think we need to be careful that we're giving the public the right information. So I'd be reluctant to do a very brief aid memoir for members, because if that was then shared with the public, it wouldn't contain enough information for the public to put their complaint in. The public need to be looking at the complaint policy. So I'm happy to do a short note for members to say, but they need, if they are referring members of the public to the complaints policy, they do need to refer them to the published policy.
Yeah, no, that's okay. But it you know, the short sort of note I would see is saying, right, look, you know, stage 1 is use the email address for the complaints process. this is where you need to report it. So I think we're talking the same language, but just something so members have got that rather than wading through the policy. That's all.
Yeah.
And
they were provided with that at the training, but obviously we can recirculate. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And the other issue in regards to the question that Martin raised about the Denbighshire consortium for presumably parking, is it? It's sort of the traffic enforcement issues. Obviously, I don't know whether Bridgend is still in that consortium, but if they are, then that issue, I assume, should be referred to a relevant scrutiny committee for because someone should be monitoring it. And I would have thought someone's doing the contract monitoring as well. So I'm just making a suggestion whether or not that should have actually, if it's referred in the Ombudsman's report as an issue, then maybe scrutiny should look at it. I don't know what your views on that should be.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Zach is still on the call, because that goes through Zach's parking teams. So probably Zach is best placed to answer that one. If he's not on the call, I can pick it up with him and get him to drop you a line, Chair, and then to explain whether it needs scrutiny oversight. Yeah,
no, that's okay. But given it is being raised, I think maybe the Ombudsman's part of the letter relating to it should be referred to scrutiny, because they then can make a decision as to whether or not it should be looked at, or otherwise I'll make a referral to scrutiny and ask for scrutiny to look at it on my behalf as Chair of Governance and Audit, given it's been raised. Okay. Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. There's quite a lot of information in this paper about the complaints. And again, just the Ombudsman letter, lots of details there. I suppose my question or surprise was at paragraph 3.8 of the report, where it talks about there is no central system for logging and processing complaints. I understand, Kelly, I think you touched on here. So my question was, when it says it's still in planning stages, I suppose, what does that really mean? What are the next steps? When is that going to be delivered? And then I also reflected back, how do we as a committee feel comfortable that the current process of complaints is working, such that we would feed those lessons in before we procure the central system for logging it. So I don't know if that's a question maybe Andrew can pick up or come back at the next meeting, but I suppose my question is, when did the internal audit last look at complaints? How do we know it's working? And how do we take it forward in terms of creating that central system? Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew.
Okay. As it says in the report, the Granagas project is being led by customer services team. So I can certainly ask if Phil O'Brien is available for your next meeting to come along. I think he does come fairly regular to you, so you can include that in his next report. Internal audit did look at complaints, which to me seems fairly recently, but time flies, so it may well have been a couple of years ago now. And I don't think any issues were raised, but thinking back, it probably is a few years ago. So more than happy if internal audit want to come along and do a review.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Again, Andrew, I think I'll pick it up in a recommendation that we ask the relevant officer to come to us at next committee, updating us where they are on the, is it the Granicus scheme, and insofar as it affects complaints, so we can get that assurance. I think that's the important thing. Councillor Martin Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A number of the things have been covered to some degree. First thing in the Ombudsman letter, I think my irritation from last year, possibly in this forum, but also in the Standards Committee, and it is pedantry to a degree, but Appendix G gives a list of complaints by town and community councils within our patch, and it's really this is the pedants committee really, because we're governance and audit, but I would expect the Public Services Ombudsman to have a similar mindset. And there are 20 town and community councils in our patch, and they've only listed 10. Now, we did raise this on one of the committees last year, and they said, oh, those are only ones that we've got on our list because they're previously known to us. But no, come on, if it's going to be correct, it's got to be correct. So I would like to communicate back to the PSOW to say, let's get the correct list on there, please.
Yeah,
because the inference is that if you're on there in some way you're naughty. And
well, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Isn't it, Kelly? That's right. The 10 that are listed here is where there have been complaints made against the community council. You know, why list the community council if they're actually complying with the law? But
and that's my point,
that's
Chair,
my
yeah.
review.
Yeah.
Kelly, I don't know what your comment is.
Yeah, that's the feedback we had from the Ombudsman last year, because we raised it after it had been mentioned in this committee, and they said that it is only the complaints they've had, otherwise it would just basically be a nil return for everybody else. And, you know, it may not be so bad for us, we've got a small number of town and community council, but there are other areas in the country where there would be a lot more. You know, you've got to double check you've got them all and things like that. So I can write to them again. I anticipate I would have the same response.
I mean, Chair, if I could come back. I mean, this isn't my point. My main question is to come, but you know, Brackler is on there, Coity is on there, but they've got 0 returns. Now, even though they've got 0 returns, who's going to look at that? You're just on a naughty boys list. I think they either do it properly or don't do it at all.
Sorry, I didn't see that.
That's
Mark.
my point.
They shouldn't be on there, should they?
Well, either they all should, or
Yeah,
only
no,
the ones
I
with
take on
complaints. So
board.
that's my point.
Yeah, no, I did. And Kelly?
Sorry, Chair. I think it's a 0 return for a decision not to investigate. So that doesn't mean a complaint wasn't received. So my understanding is that the complaint would have been received against all these, a member of each of these community councils, and then there would have been a decision to proceed or not to proceed with the investigation, which is the first part of the Ombudsman's process. So my understanding from the response they sent us last year, which I think I did circulate to the committee, is that these councils have had a complaint against them. The ones then with the 0 next to them, they chose not to investigate that complaint. The councils that are not listed haven't had any complaints against them.
I think the chart is wrong then. That's what we need to raise with the Ombudsman, don't we? Because there should be a chart or a line or a column or whatever says number of complaints received. So if as Martin said, Coity had a complaint and whatever it is, Newcastle Hire had a complaint, at least you know they've had a complaint. And then obviously if they decide not to investigate, you know, they put one there and that's it. It's not dealt with. But I think it's the table that's wrong here, in my view. I'm not telling the Ombudsman what to do, but it's clearly the table that's wrong, Martin, I think. And I agree with you. You know, it shouldn't list, my view is it shouldn't list community councils if they have no complaints. But if they have had a complaint, and I think what you're saying, Kelly, is those who are listed have had a complaint made against them. But what it shouldn't be showing is 0, because it actually should be showing that they've had a complaint or 2 complaints or whatever it is. Does that make sense? Is that all right?
Yes, yeah. What I'll do is we'll write to the Ombudsman again with that feedback from the committee. Obviously, it is a matter for them.
Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got two questions,
yeah.
proper questions, Chair. So the first one, and it was touched on with Biden, and I think Andrew, again, not directly, but sort of talked about this subject. If we go back to Appendix E, and it's the percentage of recommendations complied with on time. Now Kelly gave an explanation as to why some can't be complied with on time because of the complexity and so on and so forth. And that in isolation, in relation to this authority, is of course a reasonable explanation. However, it's not in isolation. We've got 22 authorities there, and there are other councils who have similar volumes of complaints who seem to have much better performance in closing things out than we do. Now, everything, there's a story underneath this, and maybe we can tease that out. So why are we only at 35%, where, for example, Ceredigion 78 or Anglesey is 92 with a similar level of complaints against us, and what are they doing that we're not? And I don't want to take this too far, but I've been on this committee 18 months, and I remember about 18 months ago there was a feeling that recommendations from this committee weren't being actioned as promptly as they should, and I do wonder whether this points to something more widespread than just the dealing of ombudsman complaints. And I've got another question after this, Chair.
Okay. Did you want to deal with that, Kelly?
Yes, yeah. As I said, my understanding is this is purely capacity and complexity. I think from that chart, we're not the only authority. There are a number in similar positions to us. I know from my perspective, the complaints team we have got is very, very small. They deal with complaints and they deal with FOI and data requests. And there's 2.8 of them in the team. I don't know the size of these other authorities have got and whether they are processing them quicker to refer them to the service area for response. I can't comment on the other authorities, but I'm happy to do some analysis on the recommendations that haven't been dealt with in time to find out more detailed reasons. Obviously, I'll have to be careful because I can't provide any details of the actual complaint, but I could speak to the service areas and find out more detail if that would help the committee.
I think that's essential. I think picking up Martin's point there, we've only complied with 35%, so therefore there are 65% not complied with, and it says number of recommendations falling due in 23-24 being 20, and those made in is 18. I think I would agree with Martin. I think as a committee we actually ought to know what that 65% relates to. Now, clearly, what I wouldn't want is us breaching GDPR and all this and that, but there, I think it would be useful to know. Because the devil is in the detail here, isn't it? And I think the problem you've got is you don't know what you don't know. And I think how is the council going to improve on that figure when, we don't know what it is, and we're required to provide some assurance to the council that its policies and procedures are in place, and we actually don't know. So, Kelly, it's not falling on you, I'm sure, all of this, because actually these are directorate issues. And I think if you could establish, firstly, which of the 65% are outstanding, you could provide us a general list to say, look, it's Directorate A, B, C, and D, and then, what's being done about the issues that are outstanding, because someone needs to respond to them, because this is all about service improvement, again, I should imagine. And again, I don't want you and your team to have to do all this legwork. It's down to the directorates to sort their own directorates out. And if the director's not prepared to sort it out, then clearly the leaders here will have a word with the cabinet members to get it sorted out as well. Is that okay? Martin?
Thank you. And then my other question, and in the letter it refers to, I think it's page 3, refers to the independent review. No one in this room will be unaware of what that was all about.
Which page we're on about now?
Sorry, it's the Ombudsman letter.
Yep.
The independent review. It's referred to in here. I think we've seen the report in the media. Did that review take into account anything locally? The report was at a national level, at a systemic level, if you like. Were there any allegations or instances of perceived bias that reported to the Ombudsman locally, and what did those factor into this review? So can we be assured that locally that we've got a robust and impartial system?
Kelly?
Obviously, I can't speak for the Ombudsman or for the review, but the feedback I've had from them is that it considered a number of aspects, individual complaints that had been made to them where the complainant perceived there had been bias in their cases have been reviewed. And as I understand it, individual members have been contacted with further information, but obviously I'm not party to that, so I can't give any details.
Okay.
Thanks. I mean, maybe at some future point when we have a letter from the Ombudsman, they could come in and speak to it themselves. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor Colin Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies again for being late. Just a couple of points of clarification, really. So I thought when we discussed this previously that we were also going to be looking at school complaints. Now I know they're separate, and I'm not looking for work. It's a big chunk there, big chunk of information there. But I'd like to know whether or not Scrutiny 2, for example, is looking at that information, because on a county-wide basis, then we can see what schools are just performing or not in respect of complaints and how they're dealing with things. So that's one point really for clarification. And I know education is a section in the report. I'm presuming that doesn't include schools, and that's just the education department. So just some clarification about that. And I got a few other issues. So should we just take that one to start with?
Kelly, do you want to deal with school complaints? I don't know whether that's within our remit.
Yeah, school complaints. So schools will have individual complaint policies. They may be much of a muchness if they've collaborated on putting them together, but they are dealt with by the governing bodies in the school. So that data doesn't come through to my team. There may well be somebody in the education department who will receive it and will be able to collate some data for you.
Could you just find out really if Scrutiny 2 is looking at that information, if it's being compiled in a report for Scrutiny 2, because that's probably the best place for it to be considered.
Can you pick that up, Kelly?
Yes, yeah.
Whether these issues are being dealt with by Scrutiny 2?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Which is another issue in terms of the naming of different committees, which we come on to.
Well, I think we're going to deal with that later.
Yeah. So if you'll indulge me again, Chair, a couple of issues really. Page 22 of my report is paragraph 3.1. Says 1st of April 2024 to 1st of April 2024.
Oh, so
I'm guessing that's 1st of April 2023 to 1st of April 2024.
That's a typo, isn't it, Kelly?
Yes, yeah.
Shows you read the reports, Colin.
Sorry?
Shows you read the reports.
And then in terms of Granicus, I think most of those questions have been answered.
Yeah.
I think it might be helpful if we knew a little bit more about who they are, what they do, parameters of the contract, etc.
Okay.
So that would be helpful for the future.
Karis, does that come under you?
It does come under
me.
I know. But yeah, I think you've already asked actually that the officer concerned maybe comes to later.
We'll make it a recommendation.
I'll make a note of what you're wanting and we can cover it then.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in terms of staff training, in terms of dealing with complaints, now we've had issues around upon my hand at myself in terms of not completing online training. I've got an issue with it being called online training. It's more like an exam than a training course myself, but there you are. But we've had issues with staff compliance around completing training, various types of training. Where are we at with staff training in respect of managing the complaints they receive, complaints, whatever? Is it good, is it bad? You know, what sort of, you might not be able to answer that, but for the future, you know, where are we in terms of compliance with staff attendance and completion, that kind of thing. And then combined with that, then later on it talks about, it's an unfortunate phrase, depending on the circumstances, isn't it? But lessons learnt.
Yeah.
So how do we actually learn the lessons from dealing with complaints?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time it's, and this is understandable as well, you know, in terms of time of work, but, you know, we just look at the data. Do we learn anything from the data? Sometimes we do. I mean, Martin raised the issue about the 35% for Progend. We're much of a muchness, to be honest with you, on that. There is obviously room for improvement. If you look at, great to seek some comparative data, because one of the things we're missing in some of these reports is comparative data. So that was good, I thought, the fact that we were in there, but we were, you know, so it is helpful in that respect, but how do we learn from, you know, the issue?
That's a key question which I'm going to raise shortly.
And then last point then, Chair, bear with me, I think a lot has been touched on by Martin Hughes. Yeah, in terms of bid 38, there's a appendix 3, there's a table on there, and it does a good job in terms of listing the different types of complaints. But then we've got a huge chunk in various other, and I'm like, that's a big chunk to be in various other. What's that about? So I'd like, if possible, and not a huge amount of work, but just like give us an indication of what's going on with our various other. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's okay. Kelly, can you deal with some of those?
Yes, yeah. So the lessons learned, we've been working on a process which is in early stages, but it is being developed and rolled out, and we'll be in a position when we report to you next year to give you some feedback from the lessons learned and some data about key themes and how they are being addressed in the services. So what we are doing is the information and complaints team, the lead officer there is working with lead officers in other complaints where we get frequent complaints to work on that and to pull together sort of action plans and details of how we can sort of prevent those complaints coming in if they seem to be repetitive complaints. In terms of staff training, that is, as you said, online modules to deal with it. The team would then also do more in-person training for key managers. So where we see there are managers who deal with a lot of complaints, they would get something a bit more in-depth than the general training. And I think take-up is quite good. That's done then on a refresher basis every couple of years or when there's new people about. And the last one, Appendix 3. Yeah, we can certainly look to break that down in a bit more detail, that chart. They're items that don't neatly fit in to any of the other categories later, but I take your point that there are quite a lot of them and it's difficult to know what they are. So we will do some analysis so I can give you some detail of what type of thing they are.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Kelly. Deb, waiting patiently.
Yeah, morning all. I think the conversation has started to move into the territory that I was going to raise, which is around how we ensure that we're in a culture of lessons learnt and how we coordinate that. And the bit for me that I think is perhaps missing is around the lessons learnt by department, and then that rolled up to themes, which may or may not allow us to draw a conclusion around the culture of Bridgend as an entirety. And within that, and that approach moving forward would be for me a real good balance between the quantitative stuff, which I think is clear in the report, but also some of the qualitative information, which would allow us to build on what good practice would look like and how we roll that out across the entirety of Bridgend.
Yeah, I think Kelly's picked that up. It's being looked at as we speak.
Yeah.
And again, I'll make comment to that because there is something I want to say about that. But there we are. Okay. Any other questions? Colin, your legacy hand is still up. Any comments? Okay, I've got some comments, and I'll pick it up in regards to what's been raised currently. I think the report itself contains a tremendous amount of data and details and percentages, and you name it. Great. So the question I pose is, so what? Because in reality, as has been raised now by several people, the devil is in the detail. And I think it is important. And I think it's, working on it as you are now, Kelly, in regards to what has been learned, is the essential criteria of complaints. It's picking up who's complained about what, is there trend data, and actually, the main thing for me is how has the directorate responded to it? Because they could be just ignoring the complaints and dealing with it. So I think it would be useful in next year's report or wherever that we have examples of where the directorate has learned from the complaints coming in, so that we can be satisfied that, and people can be satisfied that their complaints are being listened to. There will be other complaints which clearly the council cannot deal with because they are unreasonable or whatever. So it's important that we get that detail, and obviously it's important, as you quite rightly say, that if someone makes a complaint, they're told what's being dealt about it or what's not being dealt about it. So that's essential. The other issue for me is, and I raise this every time, and I'll be like a stuck record shortly. The number of complaints which comes to this council and every other council which are recorded, in my view, bears actually no resemblance to the number of complaints you actually receive, because these are the formal complaints which are in writing to the council, dealt with through the procedure. I would ask every member in this room now, how many complaints do you receive on a daily basis? And where are they recorded? Because, again, for me, you are the front line. The people will ring you up. They may not want to go onto the computer and actually make a a written response. They will ring you as the front line and say, oh, I want to complain about this. Those complaints, Kelly, it's not just your authority. Those complaints are not picked up anywhere in any authority. So everyone says, oh, you know, we haven't got many complaints in the authority. Oh, we must be really good. Well, actually, my view, and this is my own personal view, is actually it's not very good because no one collects those complaints. Now, how you address that in an authority to be open and transparent is really difficult. Now, is there an opportunity for members to press a button and say, look, I've got a complaint and it's about whatever. I don't say any service, but, you know, so that's recorded. So actually the directorates can say, right, we're getting all these complaints in this area, how are we going to deal with it and how are we going to address it? So you as local members don't get the grief in regards to it. It's not an issue for you, Kelly, it's an issue really for the Ombudsman to pick up. I did raise it in a session I was in another authority, but they tend to ignore it. But I think under-recording of complaints isn't a very good way to deal with things. And as I say, councillors are a big source of that information. So whether or not the new system could pick up councillors' complaints, I don't know. You know, it may impose a little bit more time on the councillor to actually record it, but at least your data would be up to scratch. So you know, so that's my view. Apart from that, as I said, the Ombudsman's report is the Ombudsman's report, and clearly, as you say, you know, we've got no control over what the Ombudsman does, and we should accept it. But in my view, we should also learn lessons from it if it does pick up any points where this authority needs to learn lessons, whether that's in regards to Denbighshire or any other policies or procedures. So, you know, that's my comments on that. I don't know whether there's any other comments. No? Okay. So if we go to the recommendations, to find the recommendations. Right. Firstly, the recommendation is that we note the report firstly, I think we need to note the contents of the report. Secondly, I think we need to pick up the three other points I've raised, that we receive a report at the next Governance and Audit Committee, which I think is in January, from the officer concerned in regards to the Granicus system. Is it system? Yeah. Insofar as it affects complaints and compliments. To that, we've referred the Denbighshire issue about parking enforcement to the relevant scrutiny committee for consideration, and that they report back as to what they find. And three, that officers provide an analysis of the breakdown of figures in Appendix E of the report, namely the 65% where we have not been in compliance. Is that clear? Yeah. Okay, someone prepared to move, please?
I'll formally move, Chair, with the amendments.
Sorry, Deb, you've got a hand up.
So, sorry, Chair, to come in last minute. Just the final bit for me, just in terms of the report, is that I'm not sure we're capturing at all the compliment bit, and that did strike me that is missing to give us the rounded picture of the performance. So we've got the complaint bit, but if there's compliment information, then surely we should be capturing that, because that's evidence of good practice that ought to be scalable and built upon.
Yeah. I agree with that, and I think maybe we have a fourth recommendation, that we receive a report on the compliments that the authorities received over the past 12 months. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 recommendations. So someone prepared to move, please?
I'll formally move, Chair, with the amendments.
Thank you. Can I have a second there? Seconded. Martin, anyone against? No, good. Thank you for your time and effort on that one. Next report is the Audit Wales Governance and Audit Committee reports, pages 57 to 110. Deb, is that your introduction? Then presumably we've got someone from Audit Wales to...
Yes, thanks, Chair. For the recording, Deborah Exton, Deputy Head of Finance. Just to cover a report, really, to introduce the 3 reports from Audit Wales, 2 of which have management response forms attached to them as well. So I'll just hand over to Audit Wales to go through their reports.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pick up the first item on the agenda. David Williams, Audit Manager, Audit Wales. The first report is a summary of our audit work for the 23-24 financial year. And it comes to each of the committee meetings. So it provides an update on where we are. I'll cover off the financial audit work, and then I'll hand over to my colleague who will cover the performance audit work. So you can see there, page 1, the annual audit summary. That will be finalised once we've completed our audit and all our audit work. So that'll be coming to the committee next year. In terms of the financial audit work, the audit of the council's accounts is complete, and that's on the agenda today. Similarly, with the audit of the limited assurance bodies is complete, and that's in line with the end of November timetable. And then finally, the certification of the grant claims. We have actually now completed the national non-domestic rate claim and the teachers' pensions return, and we're currently working on the housing benefit subsidy claim. So that work is ongoing at the moment. I'll now hand over to my colleague Sam to talk through the performance audit work.
Thank you, David. For the record, Samantha Clements, Performance Audit Lead for Bridgend from Audit Wales. So in terms of the performance audit work, the 23-24 work programme is almost complete. The final item is the thematic review of commissioning, which is currently underway. Our 24-25 work programme, again, is almost complete. The assurance and risk assessment work is currently underway. We have organised a workshop with Corporate Management Board scheduled for February, at which point we will be sharing the findings from this exercise to inform future work programmes. The local project review of decision-making arrangements, this is actually on the agenda for discussion today. And the further local project, the review of risk management arrangements, we're currently scoping this. Then in terms of the further items, I only wanted to draw committee's attention to the fact that our report on the national fraud initiatives has been published, and I thought that might be of interest for the committee. So that's all I was proposing to say on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sam and Dave. It's a pleasure seeing you again today. So are there any questions on this report? Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. It's a query really for, I don't know, Kelly or the person online from Audit Wales who manages issues to represent. So I note there's a lot of Audit Wales investigations into Wales-wide organisations and Wales-wide issues. What's the process, if you don't mind me asking, for an individual or a committee such as this to request Audit Wales does a piece of work on investigation into a specific issue, which may be local and which may impact on Bridgend Council and our work and our activities, but not actually Bridgend Council itself? Thanks.
Eve or Sam, do you want to answer that?
Chair, do you want me to come in there? This is Anthony Veal, the Engagement Director. I think we're all here today, so it's an Audit Wales day out. So
apologies, Anthony, I didn't see you on the corner of the screen there. We're getting value for money today out of our fee we pay you, aren't we?
Absolutely, absolutely. Just to go back on the councillor's query, there is that our work and responsibility is very defined by legislation. We don't sort of in terms of our national studies work, that's our work programme. Our national work programme is conducted via a consultation process, and the work programme is built up thereon, and it's mainly covering the issues of the day, what is really topical on a risk across public services in Wales. And again, our work in terms of Bridgend is largely determined by the risks facing the council as well. So we'd have to be very careful if we undertook a specific investigation, as suggested by the councillor. We'd need to really understand a little bit more detail and exactly what our remit would be in respect of that investigation, especially if it involved organisations that the Auditor General for Wales wasn't the auditor, or we didn't have any remit there. So it's very. I apologise for not being very specific, but I think it's a phrase you used earlier, Chair. The devil's in the detail here.
Wondering whether it's something we could ask our internal audit team to look at the regional internal audit team to look at if there is a specific query, and then in some respects, if they consider it's a national or more than a local issue, then they can have a chat with Anthony and his team in regards to whether it should be looked at a wider basis. But at least then there's that discussion that's ongoing.
Okay, thanks. Do you want me to...
No, I don't want you to announce it now. Maybe it's a matter that we can discuss with Caris, and then obviously Caris can take a view in regards to whether then we refer it on to internal audit for some investigation.
Thanks.
Is that okay? Yeah, okay. Councillor Martin Williams.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to Appendix B, the scrutiny, and let's give it its proper title. So I've taken my lenses out so I can't see properly here. Anyway, Appendix B, decision-making arrangements. I looked at it on first pass and I went, oh yes, okay, that's very interesting. But actually, there are quite a few shortcomings identified in there. And with regard, R2, for example, is update the scheme of delegation to make sure that, and I'm scrolling frantically, to make sure that the risk of decisions being made without proper authority is lessened. This is actually more concerning the more I read it, and I would like to ask Audit Wales whether they share that concern, or whether I should be as alarmed as I am.
I think we're sort of a little bit ahead. Obviously, the first report they've dealt with is their update report.
Okay, so do you want me to hold back?
Sorry, Mark. Yeah,
I'll come back. Sorry, Chair.
My apologies. So
no, it's fine.
Obviously we're dealing with the Audit Wales work programme and timetable.
That's fine, Chair. I'll come back.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
so we'll be coming on then to the
They
two.
can think about that.
No, that's okay.
In the meantime,
we'll be coming then on to the two specific reports, which is the wellbeing and the decision making. So we'll be coming on to decision making next, if there are no other questions in regards to the first presentation. No, if there are no other questions, then should we deal with the review of decision making now? And yeah, I think all else may want to just do a short introduction. Is that right, Dave or Sam? And then obviously it's for us to pick up really as a committee, and for the members, the officers to pick up, because again, this is their recommendations coming out of their review of the process.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to introduce my colleagues, Alison Lewis and Gemma Trevitt.
Hi. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
My name is Alison Lewis. I'm Performance Audit Lead here at Audit Wales. Joining me today is my colleague Gemma Trevitt, and Gemma and I undertook this review, the report of which is before members today. With your permission, Chair, I'll take the committee through the key findings from our review, and then I'll pass over to the relevant council officer, which I think may be Kelly Watson, who'll take the committee through the council's management response form, outlining the actions the council intends to take in response to the recommendations we've made. After we've done both parts of that, then I think that would be the time we take the questions from committee, if that's okay.
Yeah,
I think that would be the most efficient. Lovely, thank you, Chair. So our report before members today sought to answer the overall question: has the council put in place proper decision-making arrangements to secure value for money and the use of its resources? And the use of that terminology alludes to what Anthony Veal was saying earlier about the powers and duties of the Auditor General for Wales, and that's one of our sort of remits. So the audit criteria that we use to undertake this work is set out in Appendix 1 of the report. To support the study, our review used the decision-making process around the budget setting as our sort of tracer to look at this. Our review did not cover individual policy decisions nor undertake an in-depth review of scrutiny or regulatory committees. We undertook the work during June and July of 2024. Our overall finding was that the Council generally has proper decision-making arrangements in place, but we identified weaknesses in forward planning and pre-decision scrutiny, which we felt were undermining their effectiveness. So we came to this conclusion for the following reasons. We felt that the Council had indeed clearly set out its decision-making arrangements, but there were shortcomings in the forward work programming and pre-decision scrutiny. Our finding was that the information provided to members in committees was clear, but the role and remit of the Council's scrutiny committees was unclear, hindering the effectiveness and transparency of the Council's decision-making arrangements. We found very positively that the Council was proactively looking at ways to improve its decision-making processes, and that was to be commended for that, but it had not engaged with all members to help it better understand the effectiveness of the arrangements, and there was an opportunity there. In doing those findings, we made 5 recommendations for the Council, which are shown on page 82 of your agenda pack. And these recommendations covered strengthening the forward work programme for committees, updating the scheme of delegation, clarifying the role of scrutiny, providing greater transparency regarding the remit of the different overview and scrutiny committees, and around member training. That's our sort of high-level take of the report that members have in front of them in full. I will now pass over to Kelly to take the committee through the actions the Council intends to take in response to our recommendations, and after that we'd be happy to take any questions that members have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Kelly?
Thank you, Chair. So we completed the management action plan, and I'll just run through what we concluded there, and I think our responses were accepted by Audit Wales. So in relation to the forward work programme, we've agreed we will extend that to 6 months. Currently we have a 3-month programme, so we're going to extend that to 6 months, and that will be in effect from December 2024. The way we're doing that is we're encouraging our corporate management board to forward plan obviously for a longer period, and then the formal forward work programmes for Cabinet Council and scrutiny will be published on a 6-monthly review. In terms of the scheme of delegation, the changes that were needed were in relation to the changes to Cabinet portfolios. So that's been done. It was reported to Cabinet on the 24th of September, and it's been updated and amended on the website. The role of scrutiny, there is quite a lot of work going on around scrutiny, and a scrutiny review. Obviously, members will be aware we've had Hugh Rees come in to do a review. I am pulling together a paper which will be presented to scrutiny chairs, group leaders for discussion, to take that forward to see what we can do. I think part of the review was around the naming of the committees, so we're also looking at ideas for how we can sort of better label the committees so the public know what they're referring to instead of just 1, 2, 3. So that will all form part of this review that we're doing. And then in relation to the members' training, we do have a learning and development strategy which Democratic received reports on. The team, Rachel's team, will continue to canvass on training requirements, and these will be fed into the training programme then as requested by members. I think that was all the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you, Kelly, for that. Hang on a minute. Nope, okay. We're now going to questions then. So I've got a list of people already who want to ask questions. So if anyone else wants a question, just raise your hand on your computer. Martin.
Yeah, I referred you to the question I asked some moments ago, but I didn't quite get to the end. But the point was, it looks quite stark, and it looks like it's audit language, and it can be quite quite concerning by very virtue of how it's written. But the more you read it, the more you think, well, gosh, this organisation had very weak decision making, and there were risks that decisions were made that ought not to have been. Did the audit find any evidence of that, and how does the robustness of our decision making compare with other authorities in Wales? Because on the face of it, again, when we go back to the public services letter, ombudsman letter, that it's in isolation looks very stark. So how does it look across the piece? And was there real risk there? Was that risk realised?
Alison, do you want to do that? But I think you outlined at the very beginning, you didn't look at the any actual specific decisions made. You were looking basically at the process. But do you want to clarify the point for the councillor?
Yeah, sure. Yes, we were looking at the council's arrangements, and I'm pleased to tell the committee that generally we found that the council had proper decision-making arrangements in place. There were some weaknesses, and those are set out in the report around forward planning and pre-decision scrutiny, which were undermining the effectiveness, hence the recommendations that we have made. In terms of the scheme of delegation, which is the one the councillor raised under the previous agenda item, but perhaps if I could cover it off. Was that a problem? No, I'm not making light of the fact that the scheme of delegation was, at the time we looked at it in the June, slightly out of date, but those cabinet portfolios had only changed in the May. So it hadn't been a long-standing issue. It was just a bit of a timing issue, and as soon as it was identified, that the council sought to sort that out. So no, it wasn't identified as a high-risk thing, but it was appropriate that we pointed out that was needed an update and has been updated. I hope that helps clarify.
Thank you. Martin, okay with that? Yeah. Colin?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the process, we as a committee, we were concerned about some of the issues around use of delegated powers. Audit Wales looked at it. They came back and told us more or less what we thought. So I think that's probably a good thing. You know, Caris and her team can say whether or not what I'm going to say now is correct or not. But I do get a sense that the processes are there, they're in place. They're not always being adhered to. And Councillor Martin Williams, he raised the issue about, you know, a certain event. To be fair to Audit, they came in 2 months in the summer. So I might have missed that, I don't know. But basically, we have had issues, and now hopefully officers will stick to some of the new processes and the impetus given by Audit Wales in looking at this issue. Yeah, so that's what I'm hoping. Yeah, sorry, Gareth. Yeah, thanks.
Simon?
Thank you, Chair. I want to delve a little bit and read between the lines of this report, and I think there may be something that we're missing here. If you read the report, and a number of times, I think on 3 or 4 occasions, it says that members were not consulted in this issue, or members were not asked this particular question. And I actually believe that we've got a deeper challenge at the moment, where I think many members, and I'd be grateful if any of the members in the committee would jump in here and either refute what I'm saying or support it. But for example, let me just give you one example. BREP, I think, is mentioned, the Budget Research and Evaluation Committee. It didn't work last year, and there's a suggestion on the table about how to change that going forward. But we didn't have a meeting of BREP to ask BREP what BREP thought it could change to go forward. I think there's another instance in here where it clearly says that the members were not asked about the overall scrutiny process. They were asked about the effectiveness of scrutiny. I do think there's most of the changes that we see here are coming from officers and not from members. And members are not involved in that more broader discussion about the shape of and the nature of the relationship between members and with officers. And as I say, I think that there's often a statement made that this is an officer-led council, and I think that's actually true, that the majority of the impetus behind this council does come from officers. And I'm not saying that's a bad or a good thing. I'm stating as a little bit of a statement of fact. But I do think that more involvement with members as we go forward would actually help this. Help us get a better decision-making capability. So I guess I've got two questions here. One specifically for Audit Wales, which is, given my statements around that somewhat lack of involvement of members in really shaping the scrutiny going forward, why it wasn't a recommendation when it was clearly stated actually in the report?
As I said at the beginning, Chair, this was not a review of scrutiny arrangements. That was not part of the remit or scope of this report. So I form no view upon that. That's as far as I can take that. I know the Council is doing internal work. Our findings as are set out in the report. And in terms of the point about members being involved, what I was trying to show in the final bullet point of the report, saying about members not being asked for their views on the Council's decision-making arrangements in general, I was actually positively saying they had been involved in their views around the effectiveness of the scrutiny process and on their training requirements. That said, I do think there is an opportunity for involving all members in reviewing the effectiveness of the decision-making arrangements, which would help the Council to gain a comprehensive understanding of their views, and that it might also provide further opportunities for the Council to improve its processes. It isn't a recommendation. It isn't something that they need to do. It is there as for their consideration in terms of improving processes and then gaining involvement. In terms of our remit and work, it is not something that we need to make a recommendation around. Our recommendations relate specifically to issues around transparency and correctness, if that helps.
Thank you, Alison.
Okay, did you have another question, Simon, or?
Yeah, I think it's just maybe a question for yourself, Chair, which is, given that we are governance and audit in more general, I wonder whether there's some initiative that we could take to review that relationship between the members and the officers in a very broad sense, and to instigate some improvement model. We talked a little bit earlier about continuous improvement and recognising lessons learned, about how we can actually form a plan to try to bring officers and the members closer together. Because at the moment, certainly I feel that there is a gap between the two. And I think it's also supported by one of the statements in the report, which talks about a lack of pre-decision scrutiny. And what that means is that very often the scrutiny committees are looking at past decisions, and that's pretty ineffective at actually making any change, because you just, okay, that was bad, and you don't get anywhere. What we actually need is something which is much, much stronger on a pre-decision scrutiny. And this is part of how members can express their opinions on the way that they come in. So this is what I'm talking about, the officer-led and member-led. Members ought to be absolutely integral in the decision-making before the decision is made. We've seen numerous decisions in the past months where major decisions have been presented up to Council and to Cabinet on 1 or 2 days' notice, with no real appropriate time to be able to reflect on those quite significant statements. And I'm thinking here about things like the waste and recycling decisions, also some of the constitutional changes that came to Council last week. There's just not enough time for members, and there's not enough structure to encourage members to have input into those decisions before they're presented to be made, and then subsequently scrutiny it's after the fact. So I do think that we need, from a governance perspective overall, to put much more emphasis on how we can make a change in the overall relationship, so that it becomes much more synergy in there between members and officers to get decisions which everybody is much happier with. I've talked long enough, Chair. I'll drop it there. But if any other members want to come in and comment, please do.
Yeah, there are plenty of members' hands up. Can I comment at the very end? Because I think some of the issues you're raising are very relevant. But I'll keep my powder dry till the very end. Martin, did you want to say something else?
Yeah, I wanted to give someone a chance before I came back in. And this is about decision making and you know, whether this was picked up in the audit, I don't know, but it's something Councillor Griffiths has touched on there, and it lit the spark. We do tend, I think, my observation compared to how we operate perhaps in the outside world is we tend to make decisions at last minute. And quite often as a council, we're asked, if we don't approve that, we had it last week, if you don't approve this, then this won't be, there'll be delays. If you don't approve this, then we'll be in, we'll be in, the sky will fall in. And there seems to be an awful lot of that. And I know no scrutiny chairs are often, I wouldn't say put under pressure, but well, yeah, let's just say it, put under pressure to for delegated decisions. And it's always seems to me, well, if you don't do this, then there'll be some catastrophe. And it doesn't feel like the way a £500 million organisation should be run. And I just wondered, well, partly it's a statement, but partly, I guess, it's a question to the auditors as to whether that came out during their audit. It may not have been something they specifically looked at, but is that just the nature of the sector we're in, or is that something, again, particular to BCPC?
I'm sure Alison will come back in, because again, lots of the issues that are being raised was not in their scope, and obviously they were reasonably satisfied about the decision-making process in the council, subject to some recommendations. But Alison, do you just want to pick up that point Councillor Williams has raised?
So we looked at the council's decision-making arrangements overall. As part of the council's overall arrangements, we looked at and found that as part of the arrangements, the council does have an approved process for taking delegated decisions, which clearly sets out the process to be used. We did not, as part of the review, look at the application of that arrangement, but the process for delegated decisions is referenced in the Constitution and was accessible to be viewed on the council's website. So the arrangement that was set out was okay in our opinion. We didn't test the application of that. Okay,
Councillor Granville.
Thank you, Chair. Just for a bit of clarity, please, if I could. R2, I'm also, the scheme of delegated powers has been updated. That's the first question, right, to Kelly. Then in the reply, it's got, the scheme is reviewed and updated regularly. Changes will be made to reflect changes to cabinet portfolios and with a report of cabinet on the 24th of September. I haven't got a problem with that, but as a chair of another committee, I'm not told of any changes at all to DC, right? So there could be changes to offices in DC that I'm not being aware of. So, I think we need to get across the board here what's going on. You need to spread it so everybody knows exactly where the changes are to delegated powers, to officers. That was only my concern, Chair. As a modern officer, you know what I mean? It should be done. Thank you, Chair.
Kelly, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, those changes are reported into full council. So there would have been a report to council with any changes. If there are anything direct then for a particular committee, we do email the chairs of that committee to let them know.
Okay, thanks. Before Mark, let's have the Chief Exec in, because again, I think we've got a report from Audit Wales here, which has been responded to. Clearly, there is some ease about decision-making within the council, and again, that needs to be addressed elsewhere. And I pick up fully what you said, Simon, in regards to maybe, that's something we should look at. I think we need to remind people that, there are other committees of the authority that could look at it. You've got the Democratic Services Committee, which could actually look at it as well. But again, I'll leave it because I know the Chief Exec wants to just come in, and obviously I will invite the leader just to come in because obviously I know the leader takes this very seriously, and maybe we can get some answers in regards to what's happening within the council moving forward, because obviously we've got to change of leadership. Mark, do you want to deal with it first?
Thank you, Chair. I just thought it'd be helpful if I made a contribution, having listened carefully, but also having just reread the report in the last 20 minutes. I think what I would say is we need to be proportionate here. I've just read the report and I've heard Alison say that bear in mind the actual findings of the report was that the council had sound decision-making processes. In other words, I feel from some of the comments, I thought I'd better reread it. Did it say we didn't? Now, that's not to make light of where we need to make improvements, and Kelly's been through a number of the recommendations and things that we're doing to improve things, most particularly about populating the forward work programme at an earlier stage so that there can be greater member involvement and understanding, and the issue of pre-scrutiny. And I do genuinely take on board that there are improvements that we need to make in elements. Incidentally, one of the points Councillor Griffiths made about the waste contract, of course, that did go to pre-scrutiny twice before the final decision. So there are examples where that's already happening as well. So I think all I would plead is that I think there's some very valid points made, but I do think we need to be proportionate here, because I said I did read the report expecting to say, reread the report expecting to say that we were awful. It doesn't say that at all. It actually says that the governance processes within the council are good. So I would just remind members of that, because I'm listening thinking, well, have I read a different report here? But there are improvements we need to make. There are absolutely some valid points, but as I say, I think there does need to be balance in terms of what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for that. John, do you want to make a contribution?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I appreciate that, because I know I'm not formally invited to the meeting, but I would like to make a comment if I can, and following from, I mean, firstly, the report is useful. It does point out some areas that we need to look at. One of those, scrutiny. I've been saying for a while, we do need to review the scrutiny process. But there has been progress on pre-decision scrutiny, which has just been touched on with the waste, a big ticket item. At least twice this year, there's been pre-decision scrutiny committee meetings. So there is progress, and I'm not sure if the report actually acknowledges that. So we've started that process. But the other process we started, which as you touched, myself only been a new leader for 6 months, and there's clear change needed. That change is not going to happen overnight, because it revolves around culture. It's been touched on earlier. There's a real need to change culture. I don't like the word member controlled, officer controlled, but there's a need to move this authority to a more member focused. I've said in several meetings lately that officers advise, members decide. We've got to move that direction, but that's not going to happen overnight. But it's all about culture, and that change is in process. There's scheme and delegation. I think there's more work can be done there as well to look at the actual levels of delegation, what's delegated, how that process. So it wasn't a part of what the audit have looked at. The process behind it needs a bit more work, in my opinion, and that's ongoing. And there is a lot of work ongoing behind the scenes, as Mark said with the Chief Executive. This is not a bad report. There's some good things in there pointing out that we could do better perhaps and look at changing. And scrutiny is one of them. I've been a long fan of scrutiny. Bridgend had a real good reputation 10, 15 years ago. It was scrutiny at Bridgend. We were held up in high regard. But we do need to do scrutiny better, I think, and can do better. And I'm fully behind that. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to raise another item within this area, if that's possible. It's about members' training, if you want to take that now, or that's on page 81.
Well, it is a recommendation, isn't it? Members receive and encouraged to access a relevant training programme to ensure that they understand, they're well equipped to understand and undertake their roles.
Yeah, I think Kelly's covered that off well, but just to let this committee know that Democratic Services considered the matter last week, and there has been an improvement, certainly from the 6 out of 51 members who received their mandatory training, so that is increasing, and there's an intensive effort now to get everybody trained up as soon as possible, so there is progress there. But I'm not aware that the Democratic Services Committee were aware of the of this feedback from Audit Wales, so it's just tying that up as well.
Oh, right. Well, this report should have gone to Democratic Services because it goes to the heart of governance, really. But there we are. Kelly, did it go to Democratic Services?
No, I don't think it has yet. I think this is the first place it's come. I think it's only recently been published.
Okay. But obviously it does. Yeah, it does need, because obviously it's within their remit in reality. Cool. We've got more people. Simon, you're going to have the last word.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I welcome the leader's comments, and I also acknowledge Mark's comments as well about do we have a robust decision-making policy? Yes, we do. My focus really was on, does that policy actually include members appropriately? And that's why I welcome the leader's comment, because I think previously it didn't, but I think we are moving in the right direction. And so I will welcome more changes in that direction, where we are very clear that decisions are made by council, and officers advise the council. So I think that's a good approach for us to get to in more general. But thank you very much for letting me back in, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. And I'm going to finish it there. I'm just going to make some comments, really. I didn't take this report as a bad report. I thought lots of these issues are fairly reasonable. And actually, if you went to most of the 22 authorities in Wales, you'll find similar issues. And I know this was a piece of work done specifically, obviously, within Bridgend. And I think, Audit Wales have certainly picked up, the relevant issues that need to be addressed. And I think the recommendations aren't onerous, and I'm sure Kelly would think that they aren't that onerous, and can be easily resolved. I think there are deeper issues in regards to, the use of delegated powers, the scheme of delegated powers, and I'm glad Kelly clarified the matter that whilst scheme of delegations went to Cabinet, I would have thought it should go to Council in reality, because again, it should be open for discussion and, and open and transparent. But again, that all relates around the functionality. Are they Cabinet functions or are they Council functions? So, which is the nuances of some of this, these bits and pieces. But if it forms part of the Constitution, then I should imagine that the Constitution says that the Constitution should go to Council for final sign-off. But for me, I think the issue about the scheme of delegations is always going to be a thorny issue. The reason being is that on occasions, members want to bring the power back and don't allow the officers to run the authority. Now, this is, as Councillor Mark Williams said, this is a big organisation. We're dealing with public money. And with all due respect, people like yourselves, the councillors, you've got better things to do, and more, the time taken on making some of these decisions is needs to be delegated down to the officers. And as Mark Shepherd has said, that has to be balanced and proportionate in relation to what you're actually dealing with. Do the councillors want to deal with, shall we buy a postage stamp? In some authorities, they used to look at postage stamps, and it used to go to council to decide whether or not we should buy first class or second class stamps. Those days have gone. Money is short, and it needs to be spent responsibly. I agree that the scheme of delegations need to actually reflect good practice within the authority. You as a council need to satisfy yourselves that the delegations are being dealt with appropriately, and there does need, in some respects, and Kelly can, I'm sure, clarify this point, if a delegation is used, whether or not that delegation is subject to call-in. Because what you don't want is decisions being made, as you said, Martin, within 2 days, and it's a fait accompli. So, are they going to be subject to call-in? Do they need to be published? Because the worst case scenario always is that you find out 3 days after the decision has been made and something's happening, and you are on the front line with the public. So I think it's that mechanism to ensure that the members are fully briefed, picking up what you say, Simon, in regards to being involved. Whether you like the decision or not is irrelevant in some respects. As long as it's been made properly and in accordance with the scheme of delegation, then so be it. But it is that sort of being made aware up front. The issue always about, I've viewed it time and time again, it's an officer-led authority. We don't do anything as members. We haven't got any power. Well, actually, you have all the power, because no decisions in reality can be made without council agreeing it. And you agree that through your decision-making ways and actually a scheme of delegation. So, you need to be acting together. And the best authority is the officers speaking to the members and the members speaking to the officers. And certainly in regards to the lead administration, as John said, it sometimes is a cultural issue. And I think, working on it, which John has committed to with the officers, is very important. The only other thing I say about scrutiny, and I've raised it before in scrutiny, people don't understand what the role of scrutiny is. You're not there just to beat up the administration. You know, you're there to actually put forward proposals for improvement. If you referred an item, then you look at saying, well, actually, administration, think about this. How about doing it this way or whatever? You're not there to give them a good beating up. It's there to assist the authority going forward, because ultimately, while you may be ward councillors, you represent the county borough. And I think that's what people tend to forget. You represent the county borough. And I think working together to deliver this, whether it's through the scrutiny agenda, whether it's through the Democratic Services Committee, whether it's through this committee, the aim has to be always continuous improvement. And I think, you know, that's where we got to get. So I'll get off my high horse now. But I think, you know, people need to be working together to deliver the very best services it can for the county borough's citizens. And hard decisions have to be made. And unfortunately, that comes down to the lead administration, and they will make the decisions, and actually they will take the consequences in the end of the electoral period. So, you know, as we're having now in the national agenda, clearly, you know, they've been in whatever post 4 months, and everyone's expected the changes to be made. But decision making is robust in this council. It can be tweaked, and I think that's the way Mark and the Chief Officer team and Kelly is going. So I think you've got that assurance, but we just need to keep monitoring it. Okay, shall we go on to the next report? So sorry about that, Alison and your team. Thank you for that piece of work done on decision making. Greatly appreciated. We got the next report, I think, is the wellbeing one. Is it the wellbeing?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so basically, this is a high-level review of the Council's approach to setting its wellbeing objectives, and this formed part of our 23-24 performance work programme. The wellbeing objectives under review were those published in April 2023. It also forms part of a 5-yearly cyclical programme of work to help discharge the Auditor General's duty, and this is under the Act, and it will culminate in a national report which we can expect next year. So the aim of the review was to assess the extent to which the Council has applied the Sustainable Development Principle in setting its wellbeing objectives, and the project question was framed around that. And then very quickly, overall, we found that the Council has applied the Sustainable Development Principle when setting its wellbeing objectives, but again, there are always opportunities to improve. So we've suggested in the report that the Council has opportunities to build on some specific aspects, and these are in particular how it involves its citizens, and this was indicated in the Council's Equality Impact Assessment. So basically there is scope for the Council to involve different communities, for example, in shaping the wellbeing objectives at an earlier stage. And then secondly, how it intends to work with partners, and this is to give an indication of the scale of the work that it is currently undertaking, and the fact that there is a broad range across some public sector boundaries. And then finally, we also found that the wellbeing statement within the corporate plan was missing a couple of elements in order to be compliant with the Act. So these 3 areas formed the basis of our 3 recommendations. So that's all I was proposing to say as an introduction. So if I could now ask the officer responsible to respond to the committee and our recommendations. Is that okay, Chair?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Alex?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Fab. So in response to the recommendations, recommendation 1 reminds us to include a statement about the full range of statutory requirements. I think it's important to say that we do these things, we just haven't included them in our published corporate plan, and we will absolutely do so next time. Recommendation 2 asks us to build on our current approach to engagement. Again, we will do this for the next corporate plan. And I think starting the process much earlier is one of the main learning points we all have from the development of the last corporate plan as a whole. And then finally, recommendation 3 asks us to set out in the corporate plan how we'll work with partners to deliver those wellbeing objectives. That's also something that Cabinet identified in our self-assessment considerations this summer. So we'll make sure this is included in our next corporate plan delivery plan next year, as well as the next iteration of the corporate plan in 2027-28.
Thank you for that, Alex. Any questions from members? No? Any comments? The only comments I make, oh, Colin. Sorry.
Thanks, James, a late Dan, so yeah, it's again, some of these issues have touched on a theme for me, and that is around analysing data. We talked about it earlier on. Data is crucial for judging performance, and sometimes it's really lacking. So my comment would be, again, the report is good in that it's telling us things we already know, but also just identifying areas for improvement. That's my comment. Thanks, Chair.
Any other comments? The only comment I make, Alex, whilst we've got the completion date in here of March 2028 for 2 of the items, clearly that's beyond the next election period. And I'm just wondering whether in the run-up to the new corporate plan, these items actually could be taken into consideration now, and actually they could be signed off now, because you know, otherwise these are going to rest on the action log until March 2028. And you know, whether we want that, I think that's, in my view, a little bit silly. I don't think that's the right word, but you know, is that we've acknowledged it, we're going to deal with it now, and we'll deal it with now, and then obviously when the next iteration of the corporate plan comes out, then clearly you're aware of them. So you know, these aren't big issues in my view, and you know, in regards to the formulation of the next corporate plan, I would have thought you'd be doing consultation now. Because again, you know, whilst you've got your new corporate plan in place, you would want to get that data and that information from the public. So I'm just wondering whether March 28 is a reasonable time. Alex?
I think the reference to March 2028 is when it will be finished and the next corporate plan published, rather than when we'll actually do the work. So we won't be able to sign it off until 2028, but we'll be doing it whenever we start the next corporate plan, which is probably whenever we get over the development of the last corporate plan.
Yeah,
which hopefully will be soon.
So the view is, though, Alex, you will have picked these up in the next iteration of your draft corporate plan, so it won't be when it's signed off. All I'm saying is you've picked them up now. You'll incorporate it in the next corporate plan. You'll pick up the issues about consultation. I think, you know, build on this current approach to engaging, etc., etc. So you'll be doing that way before March 2028, because you know, March 28, as you said, is when the final corporate plan will be coming to this council. So I think all I'm saying is, I'm just saying, you know, do we need the date of March 28, or can we just sign it off now as saying, well, yeah, we will deal with it, and that's it?
I'm happy to do that. I just, you know, whether my sort of word is good enough at this point.
Sam, what's Audit Wales's view?
The reason why we use those dates is the fact that the council will be going through the process of setting a new set of wellbeing objectives within that time period.
Yeah.
But as you say, they could still adopt the principles behind those recommendations now.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, that's the issue. You know, my view is you adopt them now to move forward. Alex?
I'm happy to do that. I just haven't got any, you know, normally I would like to report actions based on a recommendation, and I wouldn't be able to do that right now, other than to say, yes, we're going to do it.
Yeah. Oh, no, I can understand, but you know, you don't want a March 28 date, do you? So when's the indication you're going to be starting the new corporate plan and engagement?
Well, that's what I was saying earlier. Last time we did it, that was probably all a little bit late in the day, which is why that engagement was flagged as being quite late.
Yeah.
So that was probably, I don't know, six to 9 months before the publication. So we would want to be going at least a year before the publication this next time. So maybe, you know, April 2027, summer 2027 for public consultation, maybe.
Well, put it in April 2027. I'll still be here, hopefully then, because we'll have the election in May. So we'll pick it up then to make sure it's being delivered. Well, hopefully I'll still be here, but, you know. Simon?
Thank you, Chair. I just had just a question on recommendation 3 about working with partners.
You're taking advantage of me now?
I am. I just wanted to make sure that the definition of partners there is quite wide, and in terms of the overall wellbeing objectives, and that sort of includes things like net zero and other stuff, that we have opportunities to work with. I mean, the one that comes to mind is heat pump providers, where it's actually incredibly difficult at the moment to get heat pumps installed in Bridgend area because there's nobody that sort of validates suppliers and things. So what I want to do is make sure that in the corporate plan that it's not the usual suspects, if you like, around the partners there, that we actually have a broader mind to think about other organizations or even creating organizations that might be able to help us with the broader recommendations and helping our residents do net zero, not only look internally at ourselves. Thank you very much for your forbearance, Chair.
That's okay. I don't know whether you want to respond, Alex, but my response to that, well, what a wonderful issue for scrutiny to look at and put actually that into the mix. Okay. I think that's it, isn't it? There are no other reports. There are no. I think the recommendation primarily is just to note the reports. Someone prepared to move that?
I'll formally move we note it, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, seconded.
Right, thank you. Anyone against? No. Can I, before our colleagues from Audit Wales go, or those who who do not wish to stay, can I just thank you for your contribution today? It's been greatly appreciated. Obviously, I would hope it's demonstrated that the committee and the members of this authority take these issues very seriously and actually want to improve the lot within the county borough. And I think that's demonstrated by not only the members in this chamber, but also by the leader of the council and chief executive who's commented as well on it. So can I just say thank you to colleagues from Audit Wales. Anthony, thank you as well for attending today.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you all. Do you want a comfort break for 5 minutes? Should we be back in the chamber by, oh, I don't know what time is it. Oh, there we are. Can I say sort of, well, give you till 5 to 12. Is that okay? Clock's not working.